the side in September. All the leaves that fall, we remember.
Jet fuel did not bring down those towers. They were exploded in controlled demolition. There's evidence of this through 800 architects and engineers. Their website is ae911truth.org. But I'm with We Are Change. We're the activist arm. We Are Change. It's all over the United States. It's worldwide. We Are Change Los Angeles. And that's wacla.org. If you want to go to there, we have a lot of good information on a lot of different subjects. Mainly 9/11 though, and what happened that day.
My initial reaction to September the 11th was that it was as advertised, that these aircraft had been hijacked, that it was a big terrorist operation, that we were attacked by Muslim extremists. As reports came out, there were some things that were reported by credible people at these accident sites that did not agree with my professional training and my background.
I don't believe it's possible for, like I said, for a terrorist, a so-called terrorist, to train on a 172, then jump in the cockpit of a 757, 767 class cockpit, and vertical navigate the aircraft, lateral navigate the aircraft, and fly the airplane at speeds exceeding its design limit speed by well over 100 knots, make high-speed, high-bank turns, pulling probably 5, 6, 7 Gs, and the aircraft would literally fall out of the sky. I couldn't do it, and I'm absolutely positive they couldn't do it.
There was definitely a blue logo. It was like a circular logo on the front of the plane. It definitely did not look like a commercial plane.
The plane wasn't no airline or anything. It was a twin-engine, big gray plane.
When I first saw the appendage on Flight 175, this extra piece of equipment, I was looking at the Evan Fairbanks footage, which is kind of bluish, and it's from the underneath. It's off-centered on the fuselage. It's between the engines. It casts its own shadow. It has its own reflection. And when I saw this, I thought somebody's had to have photoshopped this, and I wanted to get other sources to make sure that it wasn't just a product of Photoshop. It was in all the CNN footage when you took their videos and did freeze frames. It was definitely a three-dimensional piece of equipment. It definitely has nothing to do with Photoshop, and it shouldn't be there.
Anybody can see the other piece of equipment right there in the center line on the starboard side of that fuselage. It can't be anything other than an external piece of equipment.
It appeared to me that there was something on the under fuselage of that aircraft that did not belong there, at least not with a commercial airliner. Now, I'll tell you where I have seen attachments that look like that on military aircraft. Well, the pod could have been a number of things. It could have been even a missile attached. It could have been some kind of explosive attached. But whatever it was, it didn't belong there in a commercial flight.
Did the pod have anything to do with the flash? I can't answer it, but I can say this. The pod you will not find, or an external piece of equipment that large, you will not find on the belly or attached anywhere on the external part of a Part 121 scheduled airliner in the United States. It just won't happen. All that does is tell me that airplane was not the airplane that the government said it was.
American Flight 11 was the flight that hit the North Tower, the first tower that was hit. You can see this a big flash. This is before this airplane even hits the North Tower, and I would say quite probably that it was also an incendiary that caused that flash.
There's some CNN footage that shows the whole side of the plane lighting up. And just as the aircraft is penetrating the World Trade Center, there's this bright anomalous event. It's like an orange flash, off to the right of the fuselage.
The bottom of that aircraft was exposed so that there was a large flash just prior to impact with the building. There was a large flash, so large that it lit up the side of the fuselage of that aircraft. It wasn't just a small spark.
There's been some discussion of just exactly what produced this flash. Some of the scenarios have been talked about have been reflection or sparks or static discharge or possibly an incendiary attached to the aircraft. This flash is produced in the shadow of the wing, so I don't think it could have been a reflection. And the other item or possible explanation would have been an incendiary. And I do believe that this is what the source of the flash was. This flash is produced right in line where the pod was attached. And as this aircraft penetrates, you see the enlarged, torn area, facade where this pod was attached. All this evidence indicates to me that it was not a reflection or sparks or static discharge, but I think it was an incendiary that was associated with the pod that was attached. You can see it with your own eyes, and in my professional opinion that there was a pod attached to the bottom of that aircraft, and therefore it was not United Airlines Flight 175.
This is a rocket pod. We shoot white phosphorus rockets that contain a phosphorus spotting charge. A very brilliant white cloud of smoke comes up when the rocket hits.
They did not come down in a pancake fashion. They did not come down in a gravitational collapse. They came down in 11 seconds. There's no resistance under that steel when it's coming down, okay? The only way you can remove that resistance is with explosives.
As if a demolition team set off when you see the old demolitions of these old buildings.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown up.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under-infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
So, you had two buildings came down early in the morning, and then you had a third building, Building 7, which wasn't even hit by an airplane, and it came down in 6.5 seconds. Now, Building 7, that was a typical controlled demolition like the type you see in Las Vegas. I mean, folks, gravitational collapses don't happen like that. That, my friends, is really the smoke gun of this whole thing. A 1,000 people were missing. They couldn't even find their DNA in the towers.
The building collapsed to dust. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
What happened to the concrete? The concrete was pulverized from river to river. There was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
Reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
If they had detonated, they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
A huge explosion now, raining debris.
It's been a huge explosion.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We just witnessed some kind of follow-up explosion.
We heard a very loud blast, explosion.
A secondary explosion at Tower 1
That is another bomb going off. He thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.